In the fall of 1918, Eleanor Roosevelt was unpacking her husband's suitcase when she stumbled upon a bundle of letters. Curious, she opened them, and what she discovered would change her life forever. These letters revealed a marriage strained by secrets, a romantic relationship between two women, and the controversies that followed Eleanor throughout her years as First Lady. Her story intertwined scandal and empowerment, making her life both inspiring and deeply complex. Eleanor Roosevelt was born on October 11, 1884, as the daughter of wealthy socialites Anna Hall and Elliot Roosevelt. Raised in New York's high society, her early life appeared privileged. However, behind the facade of luxury, her childhood was full of hardship. Her mother resented her because she considered Eleanor plain and unattractive, a painful rejection from the one person she expected unconditional love. At just 2 years old, Eleanor survived a traumatic event that would haunt her for life. In May 1887, while aboard the SS Britannic with her family, their ship collided with the SS Celtic. The chaos led to a frantic evacuation, with Eleanor and her family escaping to safety on lifeboats. This experience left her with a lifelong fear of ships and the sea. Eleanor faced even deeper losses during her early years. In 1892, her mother died of diphtheria, marking the first major blow to her family. Just 1 year later, her younger brother Elliot Jr. succumbed to the same illness. With these two devastating losses, Eleanor turned to her father for support, but his struggle with alcoholism spiraled out of control. Elliot Roosevelt was placed in a sanitarium, and in a fit of delirium caused by withdrawal, he threw himself out of a window. Though he initially survived the fall, he later died from a seizure. Before his death, Elliot entrusted Eleanor with an important responsibility to care for her surviving younger brother, Hall. She took his request to heart and supported Hall throughout her life, but at age 14, Eleanor was left to navigate immense grief and hardship while finding her own path forward. These early tragedies shaped her, becoming both a heavy burden and a source of strength. After her father's death, Eleanor was placed under the care of her grandmother, though she continued to battle insecurities about her appearance, often seeing herself as an ugly duckling. She was also inquisitive and thoughtful. Despite her struggles, she developed a deeper perspective on beauty. At just 14 years old, she wrote, "No matter how plain a woman may be, if truth and loyalty are stamped upon her face, all will be attracted to her." As a teenager, Eleanor grew more confident. Attending a private finishing school helped her come out of her shell and win the admiration of her peers. Her cousin Corinne, who also attended Allenswood Academy, described Eleanor as everything at the school. She was beloved by everybody. Like many young women from wealthy families, Eleanor had to attend a debutante ball, though she approached it with hesitation. This event marked both the end of her difficult childhood and the beginning of her remarkable romantic journey. In 1902, the same year as her debut, Eleanor met her future husband, Franklin Roosevelt. However, Franklin was not a stranger. He was her fifth cousin. Their romance began after a chance meeting on a train, and they kept their relationship a secret. This secrecy was likely necessary, as Franklin's mother, Sarah, strongly disapproved when she found out about their relationship the following year. Sarah fiercely opposed the union and tried to put an end to it. Despite her efforts, the couple resisted her interference, though Eleanor's challenges with Sarah were far from over. Eleanor and Franklin's wedding was a grand affair. Her uncle, President Theodore Roosevelt, walked her down the aisle in place of her late father. Theodore even gave his approval of the marriage with the remark, "It's a good thing to keep the name in the family." The wedding made headlines in the New York Times, and Eleanor appeared to be the ideal blushing bride. However, after the celebrations ended, her turbulent relationship with Franklin's domineering mother only worsened. Eleanor and Franklin had 6 children, but Eleanor never felt like their true mother. Sarah took over their upbringing, imposing her own methods. Eleanor's eldest son, James, recalled his grandmother once telling him, Your mother only bore you. I am more your mother than your mother is. Eleanor also struggled with intimacy in her marriage, once confiding to her daughter Anna that she found it an ordeal. Many aspects of her married life were deeply disheartening. Eleanor's struggles escalated in 1921 when disaster struck during a vacation in New Brunswick. Franklin fell gravely ill and was diagnosed with a paralytic condition, believed at the time to be polio. Despite Eleanor's devoted care, Franklin's legs were permanently paralyzed, and his disability brought immense challenges. While Sarah wanted Franklin to retire from politics, Eleanor encouraged him to continue his career. Her determination during this difficult period marked a pivotal moment in her life. For the first time, she stood up to her mother-in-law and gained a sense of independence. Stepping out of the shadows, Eleanor began to shine. She took on an active role in Franklin's political life, making numerous public appearances on his behalf and becoming a powerful and influential figure in her own right. The 1930s brought significant changes to Eleanor Roosevelt's life, both professionally and personally. While she remained devoted to her husband, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and his presidential campaign, their marriage lacked passion. Seeking emotional closeness, Eleanor found companionship elsewhere. One such relationship was with Lorena Hickok, a reporter for the Associated Press. Lorena fell deeply in love with Eleanor while covering the campaign, sparking a romantic connection. Eleanor expressed her feelings through lengthy, heartfelt letters, sometimes spanning 10 to 15 pages, filled with affectionate declarations. Their bond was evident even during Franklin's 1933 inauguration, where Eleanor wore a sapphire ring gifted by Lorena. Given Eleanor's new role as First Lady, the exposure of this relationship could have led to a major scandal. Eleanor also faced powerful adversaries. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover despised her for her criticism of his surveillance methods and her liberal views. Hoover maintained an extensive file on Eleanor, which eventually grew to 3,000 pages, and reportedly collected evidence of her relationship with Lorena, hoping to use it as leverage. Beyond this, Eleanor developed another close connection, this time with her bodyguard, Earl Miller. After meeting in 1929, their friendship deepened, and they corresponded daily. However, Eleanor wasn't the only one with extramarital relationships. Franklin himself was rumored to have an affair with his secretary, Marguerite Missy LeHand. Despite the infidelities on both sides, Eleanor and Franklin maintained a strong partnership. They recognized their inability to fulfill each other's intimate needs, but continued to support one another. Franklin's encouragement, in particular, allowed Eleanor to flourish in her role as First Lady. Initially apprehensive about becoming a traditional, powerless housewife, Eleanor redefined the role of First Lady in groundbreaking ways. She remained active in public life, delivering speeches and, in 1940, becoming the first First Lady to address a national party convention. She shattered the precedent of previous First Ladies, writing a widely syndicated newspaper column titled My Day and hosting a weekly radio program. Eleanor even sought financial independence, earning $75,000 in her first year as First Lady, equivalent to the president's salary, and donating most of it to charity. Eleanor's influence extended beyond public speaking and writing. She used her platform to champion divisive and critical causes, such as civil rights. She openly supported the civil rights movement, breaking barriers by inviting hundreds of Black Americans to the White House and advocating for equal benefits for all races, stances that often clashed with her husband's political interests. She was unafraid to challenge societal norms and take bold stands, even when it risked controversy. One of her most notable actions occurred in 1939, when the Daughters of the American Revolution barred Black singer Marian Anderson from performing at Constitution Hall in Washington, D.C. Outraged, Eleanor resigned from the organization in protest. She went further by organizing a concert at the Lincoln Memorial, where Anderson could perform freely. Eleanor's unwavering support for the Black community made her a polarizing figure, particularly among Southern white citizens, but she willingly accepted the consequences of her advocacy. Through her courage, determination, and willingness to defy expectations, Eleanor Roosevelt transformed the role of First Lady and became a trailblazer for social justice and equality. In June 1943, Eleanor Roosevelt faced harsh criticism, with some blaming her for the race riots in Detroit. Her detractors were relentless, yet their attacks had an unexpected effect. Her popularity among Black Americans soared, converting many Republican voters into Democrats. Eleanor was navigating a precarious path, and the challenges were far from over. On December 7, 1941, the United States was thrust into World War II when Japan launched a devastating attack on Pearl Harbor. The tragedy not only shook the nation, but also unleashed widespread prejudice against Japanese Americans. Eleanor Roosevelt, ahead of her time in her views, fiercely opposed this discrimination. However, she clashed with her husband, President Franklin D. Roosevelt, over his decision to place Japanese Americans in internment camps, a policy she privately despised. Her outspoken support for Japanese Americans drew sharp criticism, with the Los Angeles Times even calling for her to step down from public life. Yet Eleanor refused to be silenced and continued to fight for justice. As the war progressed, Eleanor turned her attention to helping war refugees, particularly those persecuted by the Nazis. She urged FDR to allow more refugees into the United States, but he resisted and restricted immigration instead. Years later, their son James revealed that Eleanor's greatest regret was her inability to persuade her husband to save more people fleeing Hitler's regime. This inner conflict weighed heavily on her, and soon, personal tragedy struck. On April 12, 1945, President Roosevelt died suddenly from a cerebral hemorrhage. His death marked the end of an era, but also brought unresolved pain for Eleanor. An old wound reopened with the reappearance of Lucy Mercer, FDR's former mistress and social secretary. To understand the impact of Lucy on Eleanor's life. That year, Eleanor discovered love letters between Franklin and Lucy, revealing an affair so serious that FDR had considered leaving Eleanor for her. However, political pressures and family intervention forced him to stay in the marriage, though their relationship was never the same. Despite her remarkable advocacy for civil rights, Eleanor's early life reflected her own prejudices. In 1918, she held anti-Semitic views, once describing a social gathering as a Jew party and expressing reluctance about admitting too many Jewish students to the Todhunter School, which she co-owned. These views were undeniably troubling, but Eleanor demonstrated a capacity for growth. Over time, her prejudices faded, and by World War II, her perspective had evolved significantly. In 1960, Eleanor was struck by a car in New York City, and her health began to deteriorate. She was later diagnosed with aplastic anemia, and in 1962, her dormant tuberculosis reactivated, affecting her bone marrow. On November 7, 1962, Eleanor Roosevelt passed away from cardiac failure at the age of 78, leaving behind a legacy of resilience, advocacy, and transformation.